for a bit as well. Today, we're going to be talking about unlocking accessibility with ed tech. And for those of you who have come to other sessions that we've done in the past, this is really our basic session. So it's the pivot point for all of the other accessibility sessions that we're going to have later on. So if it seems a little bit basic, it really is just that beginning entry point. And as we go into future sessions throughout the year, we'll be getting and diving into more and more of the tech tools that you can use, how to use AI, how to create digital strategies, non-digital strategies that align with the different UDL guidelines. A little bit about me, my name is Carrie Lane, and before I started at the county office, I taught 3rd grade and also middle school English and served as an educational technology and curriculum coordinator at the school where I worked. I have a master's degree in learning design and technology and also have an assistive technology certification. So I'm really passionate about accessibility and assistive technology and look forward to bringing that to you and sharing with you not only how you can use assistive technology with certain students that might need it all the time, but also with your students in general to support all of your different learners.
Carrie, can you just confirm that everyone could see your shared screen?
Great call. Can everybody see my shared screen and hear me okay? We had some difficulties in the past with that. I see a couple of head nods. Perfect. Thank you, Sandra. All right, so on this page here, we have my contact email. If there's anything that we talk about today that you have questions about or just anything in terms of accessibility that you've been wondering about, please feel free to email me. Also a link and a QR code to today's resources. And I have on here some upcoming events that our EdTech team is offering. On September 17th, we have a How to Build Your Online Presence session that will be run by our coordinator of EdTech, Chris Garcia. You can hit register here to register for that. We have on September 24th an esports network meeting also run by Chris Garcia, and Alicia Gallegos Butters will be there as well, I believe. You can register for that here. We have Google Back to Basics. That one will be Google Classroom, and that will be led by Alicia as well. You can register there. And our next accessibility session will be Empowering Inclusive Learning, Leveraging EdTech to Meet UDL 3.0 Guidelines. Some of you may know that UDL, the new guidelines have been out since July. And so what that one is going to do is it's going to delve into digital and non-digital strategies that you can use to meet those new guidelines. So we'll go over the different guidelines and then we'll explore tools to meet those guidelines with your students. The registration is there. I won't read this out loud. I will just mention that we always do like for accessibility sessions to do a disclaimer. Some of the main points, we do share tools and extensions. Always check with your districts to make sure that they align with your district's policies for privacy and reliability before trying them out. And it is best if you have students with specific needs and IEPs and 504 plans to check with your student's family and IEP or 504 specialists before implementing these as well. All right, so let's dive in. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the importance of understanding in promoting accessibility, and then we are going to talk about key strategies, guidelines, workflows, and tools that you can use to build your accessibility toolkit. And like I said, today will be just an overview of each of these things. And if there's something that you want to know more about, we definitely have sessions that align to each of the things we talk about today. So you definitely have the opportunity to dive in deeper in the future. Let's start off by looking at what is childhood disability? So we're all working in education and we may have students who have specific disabilities. The concept of childhood disability is when students or children have physical, mental, or emotional conditions that limit their ability to do certain tasks or activities. And we have some disability data here. And I won't read through all of this, but really the staggering thing to point out is that students with disabilities had a much lower four-year graduation rate from high school than students without disabilities. And I think that that's our call to action as educators, that shows that we have some work to do on making sure that we are creating classroom environments where students can thrive, whether they have certain emotional, cognitive, learning disabilities, whatever they're going through. We have so much technology out there now to level the playing field. And so for us as educators, that's really important. All right, so I'm going to play a quick video. It just goes over some student experiences with different types of learning impairments.
My name is Jade. I'm in the 8th grade, and reading is a huge struggle for me. Teacher would ask me to read in front of the class aloud. I'd open my mouth, but no words would come out. Not because I couldn't speak, because I couldn't read the words on the page. They were jumping around, backwards, blurry, sideways. D was a B, W was an M. I just kept it all to myself. Like, no one can relate to me. This is just my problem, and I have to deal with it. I have to find a way to deal with this. Oh my gosh. I can still remember the names. Idiot, dummy. Going through that takes a piece of you. After a while, you just you get this numb feeling, like it just doesn't bother you anymore. That's when you get really worried. That's when you should get really worried. When you get this numbing feeling, someone calls you something, you're like, I don't care. They're right. That's the worst feeling in the world.
I'm Alex, and I'm in the 6th grade, and math is not easy for me. When I look at a math problem, all I see is confusion, and it's like, what are numbers? A lot of times I get the signs mixed up. I don't know what they're called. My brain is going here to there, to there, to there, to there, to there, and it's just so crazy that I just want to scream. My stomach starts to hurt. I start to think the worst things about me. It's so overwhelming and stressful that it's hard to even think.
My name is Phoebe. I'm 11 years old and I have got cerebral palsy. I am disabled and I cannot walk or talk. I use a special computer to help me talk. I use that by looking at my screen.
Would you like to do at school?
I like maths.
What would you like to be when you're older?
I would like to be on television.
What's it like not to talk?
It is normal. You might meet me or someone else with a physical disability. Don't treat us like a baby or ignore us. Talk to me.
My name is Dylan, and I am autistic. All my life I wanted so badly to connect with people. But they couldn't understand, because I had no way to communicate. So many people can't understand that I have a mind. All they see is a person who is not in control. But now you can hear me.
Hi, Dylan.
Hello, my name is Dylan Bartwash. We are the reality of our thinking life, and are capable of so much if we just open our minds.
Okay, would anybody like to share anything about their feelings about the video, or whether you have any students that you've worked with in the past or current students that maybe are experiencing one of the learning challenges, communication difficulties, motor difficulties? It was hard. Oh, yeah. It's definitely hard to hear the struggles. And it's true that we have so many advancements that we've made in technology, and we've made such a difference through those technological advances, but it is still hard to hear about the struggles. And I think that there's a real opportunity there to kind of think about the way that we design things too. So it's not just about the technology, though technology definitely helps, but thinking about how we can really constructively and responsibly design things for our students to make it even better. So I have a couple of simulations here just to give you not only the experience of what it's like when things are hard, but also just to think about how the instructions or the way that we design things can influence whether tasks are difficult or not difficult for certain people. So if you've done this before, you may be familiar with it, but when I hit play, you're going to see a word that's in a certain color, and the word is going to be the name of a color. So you say the color you see, not the name of the word. And I invite you, since we're doing this on Zoom, usually I have people just say it out loud, but if you feel comfortable, just say it out loud to yourself while you're on mute, just to see how you did. And then we will debrief. So does anyone want to share how they felt about that simulation, how you did? You can feel free to share it in the chat or to unmute and share. And while we're waiting to see if anyone shares, I also want to point out that the simulations we are doing today, I do them with students at our Linda Vista Innovation Center as a part of an accessibility experience that we have there. And it's really interesting, number one, to see how readily they try to do this activity and how after a little bit of time they get used to it, but also the strategies that they start to use. Thank you for sharing. It doesn't matter how often you do this, you still struggle. And I think that that's a pretty common thing unless you come up with a strategy that you consistently use to do something like this. Does anyone else want to share how they felt about the experience? And just as a little side note to think about, if somebody was unable to read, so say that reading was a struggle for them, or they're a young learner and they can't read yet, this actually would make it a lot easier for them, because if you just look at one letter of the word or you just look at a section of the word, you're able to do the activity much more easily. And so not only is it important to think about strategies that we can give to our learners to do tasks that might be hard for them, but also just because a learner has a struggle with one thing, that doesn't mean it's going to make everything harder for them. Sometimes some people struggle at one thing, it makes it easier to do something else. So another one, I found myself stuttering as I tried to say everything out loud. So yeah, it's really tricky. And here's one more. So in here, we have numbers 1 through 100. And so what I would like you to do, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm just going to set a quick timer on my phone. When I say go, try to find the numbers in order. So you're going to look for 1, then 2, then 3, and so on. And keep looking for the whole minute and try to find as many numbers as you can. Usually with kids, I would have them X them off, but for you, just mentally check off that you found the numbers. So I'm going to set a little timer. And ready, set, and go. 5 seconds left. All right. Did anybody with a thumbs up in the chat or a thumbs up icon, did anybody get past 20? Hey, what about 15? 10? Okay, see, a 1. So we got somebody who got to 10. And with that, 15. Okay, so Tracy, did you have any strategy that helped you, or you just were able to find things quickly?
I think it just feels like luck. It felt like
Okay.
I was doing word search or something. It was awful.
Okay, so yeah, I think in general, if you see it like this, it does. It feels like a word search. It feels like luck. What about if I broke it up like this and told you instead that it goes in a pattern? So it's always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and go clockwise like that. Would that make it easier for anyone? Yeah, I saw a couple of thumbs up and a yes. So what I want you to think about with this, and usually I do have people take a minute and retry it, and you're welcome to do that yourself. But what I want you to think about with this is, again, when we're designing things, there are ways that we can structure things to make things easier. And a lot of times just thinking about patterns or breaking things into meaningful chunks that students can recognize better will help us to help our students to learn better. So I always do like to show a couple of simulations just to kind of get us thinking about the way that we design things and what it might be like to have tasks that are hard for our students. And if you're interested in more user stories like the video, where you just learn a little bit about what it's like to have different disabilities, or if you want to see articles and interviews with students who have different types of disabilities and impairments, you can go to these 2 links here. They're in the PowerPoint, and it's a really good place to just understand, build some empathy, and learn strategies that you can use to support students that might be going through that challenge. And now we'll dive into pretty much the meat and potatoes of accessible design. So there are 2 major sets of guidelines that I want to discuss today. The first one is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is version 2.2, so it's updated pretty frequently. Has anybody, just a show of either hands or yes in the chat, has anybody heard of these guidelines? Okay, see 1. All right, so the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are used for online web-based content, and they suggest that all content should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And so with that, that's usually talking about websites or things that you're going to see, maybe PDFs. But for us as teachers, taking this content accessibility, these guidelines, and making sure that even if we're printing something for our students, are they able to perceive the information? Is it, in a clear font? Is it large enough? Are they able to operate through the thing that we're printing or we have them reading on the computer? Is it understandable? Is there a lot of jargon? Have we made it simple enough so our students can understand? And is it robust enough? Do they have access to enough information where they can contextually make meaning? And so the guidelines are linked there and they're very specific. But as teachers, I always just think it's good to take these guidelines that are really developed for anyone dealing with internet-based digital content and bring it down into our level of the classroom. The other really key concept of guidelines would be universal design for learning. And as I mentioned before, in July, they updated these to 3.0, but the concept is the same, meaning that we should give to our students multiple ways that they can engage with the concepts. that they can represent themselves and express, and that we represent things to the students through multiple means as well. So this can be our instructional goals, our assessments, our methods, and our materials. Thinking before you start to give an assignment about how you can assign or create that assignment using backwards planning to think about all of your different learners and how they are all going to be able to get the concepts and the information in multiple means. Now, this I feel like used to be really hard, having multiple, say 35 students in a class. It's really hard to make sure that you're doing everything in multiple ways for every student so that they learn the best. And we're, making sure that each student and their challenges, we're mitigating that. It's a little bit easier now as we have so many different Chrome extensions, AI, things that will help you really quickly to make modifications and to adjust things even as you're planning. So you can have things like choice boards that help your students right away. And so we have a whole session just on things that you can do to meet these guidelines. But I did just want to put in here that that is a really important way to think about designing for your students, and that it's something that there is a lot of technology out there to help you do this. And so when we design accessibly, so when we follow the WCAG, the Web Content Guidelines, and UDL principles, it helps our students to do previously impossible tasks and activities and gives them greater autonomy. It also helps students who don't have impairments, learning challenges, or disabilities as well. And we'll talk about a couple examples of that. And it helps you avoid negative publicities and or lawsuits. So in general, accessibility is a legal requirement. It's imperative that we are meeting the needs of our populations. So really important on that end as well. Okay. Any questions or anyone want to share anything before we move into EdTech and inclusive classrooms? So in general, when we start thinking about EdTech for classroom inclusivity, one of the really nice things about incorporating EdTech into your classrooms is that then you're removing stigmas when you start to use accessibility features for all your students. So not only are certain students using certain things, but when you're using certain accessibility features, then everyone in your classroom can benefit, and it reduces the stigma. It also reduces barriers and makes things more flexible. So you're creating these, you're opening up these learning paths for your students, and you are tailoring your approaches, which is a great way to create personalized learning that has been shown to help our students have much more success. And by doing this, when we give students universal access, we also enhance motivation, engagement, and we enhance the success academically of our students. So let's first dive into some language tools that you can use with your students. And the first one that some of you may be using, feel free again to thumbs up or say yes in the chat if you have been using with your students any kind of text to speech. Okay, a couple of teachers are using text to speech. So text to speech converts written text to spoken words. This can be helpful for students who have difficulty reading, of course. It can also be really useful for students who have visual impairments, low vision. And it can benefit all learners because, and we've seen this multiple times before, a lot of students really benefit from not only seeing words, but from hearing simultaneously. So if you have multiple modes of getting the information, it can be really important for all of your learners. So I want to preview a tool called the Immersive Reader, which is a really fantastic tool through Microsoft. It's on all of the Microsoft products. It's on quite a few other products as well. And they also have a Chrome extension that was not made by Microsoft, but it does work with anything on Google. So it's a Google Chrome extension called the Immersive Reader extension. So you can do the same thing with that. So this is a Microsoft OneNote, and I want to show you a program called Immersive Reader. The first thing when you click Immersive Reader is it breaks it up into a much larger text, which you can adjust here. So if I didn't want the text to be so large, I can change it. I also don't need to have this increased spacing if I don't want it. With my text here, I also can change the font, and the font here is specific for accessibility. So Calibri is a sans serif font. Serifs are like the little dots that go on the edges of letters to make them look super fancy. So generally, the fonts that don't have those little fancy dots, those are more accessible than the ones that do. Calibri is always a really good one to go to because it's accessible. Sitka is one that Microsoft created specifically for accessibility. So that's why that's on there. And then Comic Sans, they've done some studies that show that Comic Sans is actually a really useful font for dyslexic students. So that's why that's on there. And then there are lots of themes. So depending on your student's vision, they may have certain contrast needs. They might need high contrast inverted or high contrast yellow themes. So the students can change their themes. They can change their text font and their text size and add spacing if they need it. So that's one part. The readability of the page is really nice on the immersive reader. But now let's talk about the screen reader portion of it, or the text to speech. So you can set a male or a female voice, and you can slow it up or make it speed it up or make it slow down. And then when you hit play,
branches, part of the tree where it separates into smaller pieces. Carry, to hold while moving from one place to another. Climb.
And so it reads aloud to your students. So those are really nice features too. Other things I like about the immersive reader, there are grammar options. So I was previously an English teacher. I probably wouldn't have them labeling the syllables and the nouns because I'd want them to do that themselves, but you can have it turn on that it labels the parts of speech and it labels the syllables. And then in this section, this is really useful. So if you have students who have a hard time keeping their place when they're reading, or if they have a hard time with focus, you can turn on line focus or a reading ruler that will create focus for different lines within the text. You can also toggle on this picture dictionary, and when you click onto a certain word, you'll see a little image and it will read that word.
Arms.
The other thing you can do in here is you can translate the text. So you can put in any language that they have here. We'll just do Japanese for today. You can do it by word or you can do it by document. And then it can read that out loud.
枝、木の一部で小さな断片に分離します。
So those are all options. When you're ready to see the original version, you can go back to the original. And then if you don't want immersive reader view anymore, you click out, and when you go back, you're in the general view for your OneNote. Any questions about the immersive reader and how you might use it? Okay. The next one that I want to talk about is speech to text. So just like we might be having tools that read to our students based on typed text, we might also have students who have difficulty with either writing or typing. And for them, it might be useful to use speech to text. It's also really helpful to all learners because sometimes the actual task of typing something is harder than getting their thoughts out and creating writing. And so sometimes it's really nice to just have this as a backup for students so that they can almost brain dump and then go from there in the editing mode, things like that. So I won't preview this, but Otter AI is one example. Another one is Google Dictation. So when you're in a Google document, you can right away go to tools, and then I believe it's just speak to Google or dictation, whatever you want to call it. Actually, let me just jump out and I'll see what it's called in a document. That would be easy. Pull it over. So tools, and then you go to voice typing. And once you do that, you click to speak. and it records your voice onto the page and types for you. So a good entry-level way to do that for your students. Oopsies. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong thing. All right, so now I also wanted to put in language.
It came machines water.
Someone want to share anything? All right, so some other things that are really useful are digital translation tools, and there are tons of those out there as well, especially with AI. Almost all of the different AI tools out there have translators. One of the basic ones is Google Translate. There's also Braille translators. If you have students who read Braille, you can translate into Braille and then come up with a way to label that way. And there's an app for ASL called the Hand Talk app that might be useful for translating text into ASL signs. So I put those in there too. All right, let's share out. Does anyone have any favorite language tools or strategies to support students with translation, speech to text, text to speech, things to make reading and writing easier? All right. Let's move on to accessible text alternatives. So in those WCAG, the Web Content Guidelines, it does recommend that for different accessibility, you have text alternatives to things like videos and also to images. And that's really useful, especially for individuals with auditory disabilities. Captions can come in handy also and alt text can come in handy for people with visual disabilities. But thinking about captions, for example, another reason that it might be useful for any individual is if they're watching something in a loud location. Now, not only are they reliant on hearing, but they can read the words and know what's going on. Especially if something is unclear, it's useful to have that written explanation as well. And for people who are non-native speakers, it's really useful to have those captions and subtitles too. Or if you are in a situation where you cannot have sound on a video, you can still get all of the information if you have captions. So there are a lot of different ways to create captions. I'll show you just a few. For example, if I have my slideshow and I want to add captions, which I should have done. Actually, I should have done it in the Zoom. I can go into my slideshow, and then when I have these three dots, I can go in and go to caption preferences and toggle captions. And now everything that I say throughout the presentation will be captioned for me. Just a note that at this point, they have that in Zoom, they have that in Microsoft Teams. If you're using Microsoft PowerPoint, they have that in PowerPoint. And I'll just toggle these off for now. They have it in PowerPoint. If you open up a presentation, you can go to slideshow and always use subtitles. And then you can choose not only what the spoken language is, but you can subtitle it into a different language. So Microsoft has even that added layer of translation for you as you're presenting. So you're typing in one, or you're talking in one and it's typing in another. YouTube also is a great way to caption things. So you can caption your videos. Let me pull it over. So here, if you have videos and you click into their details, if you scroll down to show more, there's this section here where you can turn on different captions in different languages. And once you do this and you save, you're going to be able to have captions in your video. The little CC button will pop up and people can see your captions. So especially in something like YouTube, if you're uploading a video to YouTube, it's really important to do the captioning because it's so easy. You know, yes, there might be some where you go back in and you edit your captions, but really you can do this within seconds and the AI will caption for you. So there's really no reason not to caption and at least get the baseline for it. And when you click into a video, don't mind my colleague and I, if you go into the settings, you can also adjust the way the subtitles appear. So not only are there subtitle options, but there are more options here. And you can adjust lots of different things for your captions. So again, if a student has a specific font that is most visible for them, or there's a contrast that they want to use, they can do that in the more options within YouTube. Okay, I don't see any questions or anything in the chat, but I just wanted to check in to make sure no one has any questions about captioning. All right. The other thing that's really important is alternative text. So how many people have used something like alternative text? Feel free to put a thumbs up or yes in the chat. No, okay. So alternative text is really important because if students have visual impairments, they might be using a screen reader. And if they're using a screen reader, it will read whatever is on the screen for them. But if you have an image that doesn't have alternative text, which would be like a text description of the image, then they won't know what the image is of. So when you're creating alternative text, you should say the content and the function of the image. For example, if it's an image of something like a tree that is growing into the sky, you can put that. It doesn't need to be long, it should actually be short. And you don't need to say things like image of or picture of because screen readers say it. If it's something that's just a decoration that people don't need to know about, a screen reader doesn't need to say, you can mark it as decorative. And another thing to suggest is avoiding text within images. So if an image has like an entire bell schedule on it, unless you're going to actually in the alt text put all of the text that the screen reader should use, there's no way that a student or a parent who is visually impaired can understand that because the screen reader is not going to tell them. So that's always important too. I linked on here this alt text decision tree that can get you started with when to use alt text and whether to be decorative or not decorative. And I thought we would do some practice. So in the chat, I have 3 images here. What do you think you might put for alternative text for this image? So remember, you don't need to say picture of or image of, but what is important about this? And so this could be either the way the picture looks or what you think it's trying to convey. So I can do the first one. One way that I could say it is multicolor people holding hands around a green circle. But the other thing that I could put would be something like togetherness or unity, because maybe that's what I'm trying to use it for. So it depends on the context of how you're using it. I'll give just a second for anyone to share what they think the Kindle is. All right. So the Kindle could be glasses on a book, or it could be a symbol of the importance of reading. This one, since people haven't really responded in the chat, I'll just say this would be one where you'd mark it as decorative usually. So there's like a little button you can put decorative, and that way the screen reader wouldn't read it. All right, let's go over some formatting suggestions. So we already talked about font type, and that things like Arial and Calibri, they're sans serif fonts, so they're more accessible. Additionally, be consistent with your fonts. So you definitely should not be changing your fonts in the middle of a document for no reason. It's very distracting. It makes it unclear whether you're trying to convey a message through the fonts or not, and it makes it difficult to read. And the font size should be large enough so that people can read when they zoom in or shrink their view. Usually for things like PowerPoint, that's about 18 point, and for documents, that's about 12. But use your discretion. It shouldn't really go lower than that, but you might want to always make it a little bit larger for your students too. And then one thing that's really useful is the organization of your content. So using things like headings and bullets and tables of contents can help you to really create an easy format and flow for your students to understand information. Additionally, thinking about your language, it should be clear and simple, and the materials should be easy to navigate and understand. So I do want to show you how you would make a table of contents, especially in Google. And I also have this really, really non-readable example here of what you should not do for accessibility. So we'll come back to this in a second. First, I'll show you how to make a table of contents. So if we have, and let's just take the text from this one right here. And I'm going to just, I copied it without formatting it so that I have this, and this header or this section is about educational frameworks. This section is about conceptualization of synergistic learning. This is operationalizing. And this is case studies. So here to help my students, now I would never give this to my students because the language is impossible. But if I was trying to help my students to understand all of the different headings, I would take this styles bar and I would make these into headings. So heading one again. These are the largest headings. Now, if this happened to be underneath heading one, then I could turn it into heading two, and then back to another heading one. You can set it up however you want. But then not only does this help in reading because people can see and it gives breaks and white space, but now I can insert a table of contents into here. And that's super useful for my students because now they can jump right to the point that they want to see and go from there. So they don't have to navigate through entire documents. Of course, on one page, that's not super helpful, but as things get to be 5, 6 pages, it can be really useful to have a table of contents. Any questions on that? Okay. I did put in here an activity. So I have this lovely example right here. And I would love for people to put in the chat, I won't spend too long on it, maybe just until 4:47. What are at least 3 things that make this very inaccessible? There are so many things that make it inaccessible. So please feel free to share what makes this inaccessible. Hard to read, different fonts, switching fonts mid-document, different fonts, cursive. Yeah, the cursive makes it hard to read. The font and the lack of contrast, absolutely. Mixed fonts, cursive, modified sizes, cursive. Yeah. One I haven't seen on there, but definitely the color of the document for contrast, but also the size. Even this one, which is normally would be an okay font to use, it's size 7. It's impossible to see. And so with all of this, absolutely, the font, the contrast, the different fonts, the script. Script looks cool, but it is not the easiest to read. So things you could do to make this better, in addition to making it so that it's actually readable for a student, because the text itself is incredibly difficult, you could take it all and make it the same size, Calibri size 14, take away the color background, and already we've made it a lot easier to read. So just things to think about as you're designing, even though sometimes our Canva documents or our, pretty backgrounds or fun cursive fonts look cool, they're not the easiest for accessibility. All right, now let's move into just a few tools that you can use to provide scaffolding and supports to your students. So scaffolding and supports can come in many different forms. These can be visual supports. You could be creating outlines for your students or having your students create outlines for themselves. That could be manipulatives, graphic organizers, things that really help to break down complex information and support student understanding step by step. So I've included in here just a few, and remember, we have other sessions where we're going to talk about all sorts of tech tools for scaffolding and supports, but here are just a few you can use. One is called Toy Theater. Another one is called Mathagon. Both of these are for math. Toy Theater allows you to see manipulatives to help your students learn time, hundreds charts. I'll just show you the fraction strips right here. I know my third graders, when I taught third grade, had a really hard time with equivalent fractions. So I wish I had known about this at that time to kind of go, oh, okay, well, I have that. Now, what else can I do? Does that work? No, I need something else to fill it in. Okay, so I can do that. But I could also just do 1 equals 3 of these 1/3. Things like that they can actually visualize and see. This other one, Mathagon, it allows them to see different shapes and how they kind of appear, as well as looking at things like fractions and data. And so, for example, with this, I could pull over things and have them put together shapes and see what works together and what doesn't. You could take 3D solids and it'll pick it apart, and you can unfold it so that they can see all of the different shapes that make up the 3D shapes. So there are a lot of different things in here that you can put together for your students, numbers as dot arrangements, fractions. And then I wanted to also share this one. It's called a text-based graphic organizer. And they are currently, this is George Mason University, they're coming out with more of these, but for now, what they have is they have these different options. This one was persuasive writing. But so you have your students, you work with your students to fill out the different categories. And then as you go through, and it has a screen reader too, or not a screen reader, text to speech as well. As you go through, the kids can put in different items, and then they can print out their entire outline as they go. So you can work through with your students to see what they want to do and put together this outline for themselves, and they can have these personal goals. I will write a relevant topic sentence. I will include 3 reasons. My essay goal is to have 3 reasons and 1 explanation, and it modifies things as you go. So you see that changed the different outline, and then you can have these transitions to help your students. And then they're still getting in that practice with writing, but now they have transitions and structures to help them. So for those people who are really worried that AI is going to take away writing entirely, this is a great tool to help students write without taking away that, but still using technology. Give a second in case anyone has a question about that. And then we'll just move on to our last point, which is AI. So AI has a lot of kind of power to support in the classroom. There are definitely some things to consider with AI, and we have a whole session on it. But some of the ways that AI can be useful are because it tailors educational content and pacing to individual needs. So if you have one text and you want to make it applicable for all of your different students, you can have multiple text generated in seconds. It can do all sorts of transcriptions, alternative text, captions, translations, and it can serve as a coach or a tutor. So I wanted to give you one more example of just how you could use AI to support your students in a differentiation type of mode. So here I took this really difficult 2-sentence overview of quantum physics, and I'm just going to log in really quickly. And I haven't used ChatGPT on this one before, which is why it's asking me for my information. So now you all know how old I am. And you can do this with ChatGPT, Magic School, any platform, it'll work. But now I have this difficult block right here. Now, if I wanted this to be for a 6th grade student, please explain this in 2 sentences for a 6th grade student. Be sure to pull out key vocabulary and define that vocabulary in terms that would make sense to 6th grade students. And so right away, it's kind of taken it and it's made it somewhat easier, but it didn't do what I asked it to do, which is to also pull out vocabulary. So, and I can also say this is still too hard. Put this in terms a 4th grader could understand. And it gets easier and easier. And now I can say, pull out key vocabulary and define at 4th grade level. And so now you can easily have some vocabulary that you can put at the beginning of your lesson, as well as a much easier thing to read for a student who is at a different reading level. So this is just a quick example of how you can use AI to differentiate quickly for your students. There are so many out there that you can do. It just kind of takes a little bit of thinking. When you do something like this, always remember, don't put in your students' specific personal identifiable information. There's no need to. You can still adjust your content without that. Just kind of put in the grade level or the Lexile level. Or even say something about what language is their primary language, but you don't need to put anything that alerts the AI to the actual student, just kind of thinking about it in generic terms. So leaving you with the thought of AI has a lot of options, and there are a lot of tools out there that we'll talk about moving forward in these trainings. But what else can you do using AI that supports your students? If anyone wants to share that, some takeaways from today, or if anyone has any questions. And I'm leaving up here while I wait to see if anyone has any comments or questions, just some of the next virtual sessions that we have. So as you can see, we have the UDL 3.0 guidelines, AI powered access. So that's going to be all about AI and accessibility. We have cutting edge apps and features. And then the last one is a little bit different. It's learners as solution creators. So that's going to be talking about how you can empower your students to start thinking about accessibility as they're doing projects in the classroom, and it'll take kind of a hands-on approach to our instruction. Yes, you can ask, especially Magic School, but anything can create choice boards for you. You just have to word it right. But Magic School has its own one that you can ask it to create choice boards. And we'll definitely be showing that in the AI-powered access one. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing